Hello, everybody, and welcome to another show of Tales from the Doghouse: Separation Anxiety Explained. I am Stacey Bell with Focused Fun in the U.S., and with me today is...
I am Ness Jones, and this is Bertha. She's giving me cuddles because, as you might be able to tell, Stacey, if you're watching on YouTube, of course, Stacey is obviously in the height of summer, and I'm freezing cold depths of winter. So Bertha is on my lap, keeping it warm for me.
Lovely.
Yes, today we are talking about... I got an email from a lady called Anna asking a question which we thought would be a good one to discuss on the show. So without further ado, she says, so we'll just might go through it bit by bit. So she says she doesn't believe that her dogs have separation anxiety as such. She says, I was mostly interested in the subject for her curiosity and education. She says she was curious to hear our thoughts as to the causes of separation anxiety, and is there much research?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's part.
Yeah, and I think we've covered that a little bit before. There is some research, and there is growing research, not only into separation related behaviors, but also anxiety in dogs in general. I think a lot of it points to, possibility of genetics being a factor, early life experiences. Actually, there's this really, really good review of the research out there that came out have it here in front of me, came out in, I think it's 2021. So fairly recent, called, the title of it always makes me laugh because it's like a really big mouthful and I probably say some of the words incorrectly, but it's called A Review of Epidemiological, Pathological, Genetic, Epigenetic Factors that may contribute to the development of separation anxiety in dogs.
Right. Say that again 10 times really, really fast.
Nope. You're not going to even get me to say it one more time. But it's a review article. So it like the thing that I really like about it is that not only is it gathering all the research for you, but it's kind of throwing out those studies that maybe aren't constructed very well or had some part of them that wasn't really valid for some reason or another. So it's really just looking at the studies that were constructed well and peer reviewed and all of that kind of stuff. And it goes through a bunch of different things, busts some myths. And it's a paper that I really refer to a lot. So definitely worth reading if you are geeky and really wanting to look into some of the possible causes of separation related behaviors.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, obviously early life socialization. So there was a study by Bradshaw, and whenever we're looking at studies, and I forget about the Bradshaw one, how robust it was, but whatever study you're looking at, you do have to look at the sample size of the study. So was it really significantly big or was it tiny? Was it asking for subjective input from the dog guardians as opposed to having a more objective scientific eye on it? So, things like that. But the Bradshaw one said that between dogs that are socialized, and we mentioned this last week, I think, didn't we? Dogs that are socialized between 5 and 9 months are less likely to get separation-related behaviors. So, I mean, obviously, we would probably say earlier than that, including even when the mum whelps the bitch, when the bitch whelps the puppies. What was she stressed? But when she was pregnant, was she stressed after pregnancy? What early life experiences they have, and of course, there's that genetic factor. There was another study, or there's actually been 2 or 3 studies, I think, definitely 2 anyway, about genetic dogs that. God, it's the cold. It's frozen my brain, I swear.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I know. So sorry. But yes, dogs that may be breeds that may be more prone to separation anxiety.
Yeah, and basically the it looks like, I think there's been like 3 or 4 studies that look at the breeds, and that hasn't been real conclusive. I think the different studies had different
That's right,
results, which then gets to maybe there's just certain breed lines within those breeds and that sort of thing. So that wasn't super, that part of it wasn't really conclusive, but
if all 3 or 4 studies, I thought it was 2 or 3, but 3. Let's say 3. Let's say there were 3 studies. If all 3 of them landed on a certain breed and said this breed has
exactly,
but none of them did. So
yeah. I would also think it would be really interesting to look at breed groups. Like, so instead of saying like, but like, hunting breeds or sporting breeds and guardian breeds or, herding breeds or like whatever, but just looking at different breed classes and see if that gave us more different information. Not the studies that they looked at, I don't think would have given us that different information, but it would be interesting to look at that in a slightly different way and see if we could see a trend there. But
somebody said to me about dogs that are bred to be companion dogs, like there's some Chinese ones that for example that were bred literally to be companion dogs, and suggested that those dogs might be more prone to separation related behaviors, which I thought, I can.
It's really interesting to me how anytime it seems to me, anytime you either go into like a breed group on Facebook or there's somebody writing an article about a specific breed that they like, almost always there is in there like a propensity towards separation anxiety, which kind of makes me chuckle just because that's not what the research says. And I mean, it could be that we just need more research to find those trends, or it could be that there is no correlation between breed and propensity for separation anxiety. But I always kind of chuckle at that because almost every breed would be like, oh, well, it's a corgi, so, or it's a beagle, so, or it's a, you know what I mean? And you're like, well, so anyways, it's just really interesting to me.
Yeah. So do you want me to go on with the rest? I think we have that section. Okay. So Anna has 3 greyhounds, 8 Siamese Oriental cats. Wow. And they all have considerable anxiety when one of them is separated from their usual companions, but that doesn't necessarily involve humans.
Okay.
So these animals have never been alone for more than a few hours in their entire lives and require others in their group for comfort. She says the cats are actually worse than the dogs. I think those Oriental cats, they're different to normal domestic cats. Their personalities are, but anyway, that's just me. Carry on. So this is not the usual so what she's saying is they're not really too bothered about the humans. They're more interested in not being separated from their doggy companions or their feline companions. And she says, this is not the usual definition of separation anxiety, though, is it? I often hear people complain that their newly adopted greyhound has separation anxiety, but strongly suspect that it simply needs a canine friend. That is interesting because if I'm assuming, we're talking about the ex-racing greyhounds that have retired from the sport. And, when we know that when they are growing up in the industry that they are pretty much never left alone. There's usually either a human or another dog with them. So you can imagine that they would struggle with being alone when they get adopted out to a family, and then suddenly everyone goes out and they've never experienced being by themselves before.
Yeah. So we did talk about this before on Greyhound show and maybe other shows as well. Maybe one of our misconception shows. But I do think that there are, in general, we do not see that having a second pet, whether that's another dog or a cat or a parrot. I mean, like, I don't know. That we don't see that typically helps. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, and one of them I suspect is exactly what you're talking about, Ness, with that kind of co-kenneling early start in life. And I think that you see that with not only racing greyhounds in their early life experiences, but also with some hunting dogs are also kept that way.
Yeah.
And then if they are adopted out or changed to a different environment, that can be a really big struggle for them.
Yeah. Do you remember Michelle and Benny that came on the show?
Yes.
Yeah. So she's a former client of mine. So Benny, I forget how old Benny was when she adopted him. He was a beagle, but he'd grown up in an environment with his mum and his siblings, and maybe his dad, I think, because obviously it was a breeder that had him, and they kept hold of him for quite some time. So he did move from an environment where there was lots and lots of dogs and humans to one where there was just Michelle and her partner.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why he started struggling, because he'd never experienced that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I think, is one of the reasons that we can sometimes see that secondary animal can help.
Yeah.
Another time, and I know this isn't really her question, but just to kind of review, another time we can kind of see that is if you've had two dogs and one of the dogs has passed away, and then the remaining dog or pets, you have two pets, one of them passes away, and then the remaining dog or pet
has sudden onset,
develops separation anxiety, or if they've had it's exacerbated by that. Sometimes in those cases that we can see that the separation anxiety gets better if you add another dog back in. But not always, sometimes it's like that bond they had with that specific dog. And so you may not see that. But I think in the co-kenneling, I don't know if that's a term that people use, but I'm using it.
It's a good term.
But I'm using it. So
Yeah.
I love that. It's like a shortcut. But definitely in those types of situations, I think that's the most kind of salient one for me. I don't see it a ton, but I would love for them, the scientists, to do a study on that, because I would be so interested to see how those results play out.
Yeah, it is interesting. I always find the whole greyhound thing interesting. I don't know why. I just really, makes you wonder, doesn't it? But I mean, I guess the point is that unless you want another dog, you don't have to go and rush out and buy one or get one, adopt one, I should say. If you want one, fine. But if you don't, then you need to do some training around making your dog feel comfortable being home alone. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing with that one is if you're kind of like, well, I could do another dog, but I really only want to if it's going to help. Yeah. You can do the foster to adopt or borrow a friend's dog.
If it doesn't work out, then
yeah.
Borrowing a friend's dog is a good idea. Yeah, borrow a dog and see if it makes a difference.
Yep, exactly. I actually have a client who was asking me about her dog. She adopted her dog, and she was her dog was, if I'm remembering correctly, born in the rescue and surrounded by a bunch of dogs.
Right.
And she was asking me if I thought it could help her. And I was like, well, it's not likely, but it's more expected in this situation than in most because of her early life experiences. So she was going to do just that, borrow her friend's dog and see. And in the very least, it's her neighbor's dog. So like right across the street, in the very least, she could use that as a management tool. If she could leave, when her neighbor's dog is there, she could use that as a management tool while she's training, if her dog was comfortable with the other dog there. So we haven't tested that one out yet.
Oh,
but
I was going to say, what happened?
no, we haven't tested. We just
tenterhooks.
talked about it. We just talked about it on Tuesday, so we'll see what happens.
You have to update us on that one.
Yeah. I will. So we'll see. But it's one of those things, if it's easy to test out, like for a particular family, I'm like, go ahead and test it, even though it's not likely, just because if you don't test it, it's one of those things that might hang in the back of your mind, like, oh, this could work. I'm like, just test it. And then, it does or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, then, it's off the table. And if it does work, then in the very least, you have a way to kind of manage absences while you're doing the training. The most you just don't have to worry about it. Right. So, it's for most clients, I don't think that it's something that will end up helping, but I mean, there are that small portion of dogs that it does. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's worth trying. So the rest of the questions, she says, Anna says, I've heard that true separation anxiety is not alleviated by the presence of a confident, friendly dog. Is that also your experience? Well, we've pretty much just discussed that. So when we talk about separation anxiety in babies, that usually involves separation from a parent or other caregivers. Is this different with dogs? It may be very useful to discuss different kinds of anxiety and how to distinguish between them. Right.
Okay. So
we can't do much of that, but go on.
Yeah. So one thing that made me think of is I'm not going to speak about the human part of it because I just don't know enough about like that. I know that there are some parallels. Secondly, some dogs are okay as long as they are with a person, and other dogs are okay when they're with their people. And so the difference there is like kind of that caregiver role that she's talking about there. Like if they're with their caregiver, they're okay. But if they're with anybody else, they're not okay. So that's what we would call hyperattachment, is when they need to be with their one or two special people. And that does make a training a little more difficult in that it's harder to manage absences and keep the dog below threshold. You have to do a little bit more work to kind of build your village and make sure that they're comfortable and build relationships with the people who will be covering those absences for you. So there is that piece of it. Other than helping the dog build relationships with other people and so that you can manage absences in that way, the rest of the training, slowly building their duration that they're comfortable with at home, that piece of it, that second piece of it is the same. So it's just that kind of first piece of the dealing with the hyperattachment element that's a little bit different.
And in terms of the types of anxiety, I mean, not being a scientist, I'm not comfortable discussing that, but it might be something worth exploring, Stacey. Maybe we should reach out to someone that is skilled in this area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always up for guests. I love guests. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be worthwhile. I mean, I don't know what different types of anxiety there are. I mean, for me with a dog, I mean, you've got the full-blown total panic, separation-related behaviors. But then on the lesser side, you've got things, that aren't as that full-blown panic. FOMO / frustration, easier fix. Again, the hyper-attachment stuff. I don't know. It's just, but to get a nitty-gritty conversation about the types.
Yeah, I guess I would want more context into what she was thinking with that, because there's also like, chronic stress and, and there's good stress and bad stress, and that's different than anxiety, but has a lot of overlap. And so, I just don't know exactly where she's going with that. It is a big conversation. So I'm not really sure, but within separation anxiety, I do think that we could talk about the hyper attachment, like you said, with the FOMO or frustration, or just the kind of like the streamline definition that we would talk about. As long as they're within, they're okay.
And the different, there's, you have got ones that are mild cases, and then you've got the ones that are jumping out of 2-story windows. So
right. I think the important thing to remember there is, each case is a little bit different in the elements that you might have to address. Like, for instance, in some cases where you think frustration might be contributing to the dog's inability to stay home alone, then you might have to think about, like, are all the dog's needs being met? What can we do as far as enrichment and exercise are concerned? Is there pain involved? Is there that, looking at that kind of whole big picture. We do that with every dog, but dogs who are feeling frustration, we're really going to look at that enrichment and exercise piece a little more closely as part of the puzzle to help support that dog. If it's hyper attachment, we're going to spend more time building relationships and really work on managing absences. But the gist of the training, like I said before, is the same. So, understanding some of the nuances is important, and it does affect how we work through the case. But also, if we don't know, it's not a total deal buster either, because a bulk of what we do is pretty similar.
Yeah. And I think that raises a good point too, that, the training largely looks the same for each dog, whatever it is, whether it's mild, whether it's frustration, whether it's full-blown panic. However, each dog, we tackle it differently. So it's still a really structured, tailored plan that is fairly standard. But I guess the caveat to that is that, each dog is going to have different, each training is going to have different nuances for that particular dog, because it's not all exactly the same. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, because not only
you can't take a blanket approach, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because, every dog is starting from a different point. Every dog progresses at a different rate. Every dog
set up differently.
Yeah. Homes are set up differently. What people have the headspace for is different. So there's a lot of different factors, but the important parts of managing absences, keeping the dog below threshold, making sure you go at their pace, having structured plans, all of that is the same. But
I mean, like, say you take 5 dogs with separation related behaviors, you're going to put all that stuff into place, but then you're going to go, well, this dog needs this in its plan, this needs this, it's going to be, it's all very individualized. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think we've covered all that, haven't we? Covered it all.
Whoop.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like a lot to tackle when you read it all at once. So I'm glad that we broke it up like that, because
into little chunkier little.
Yes. Which reminds me of something else.
Yeah.
Separation anxiety training.
Breaking it down into palatable pieces. Yeah.
Yep. Totally. All right.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for listening to Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. I guarantee you my dogs know that we are wrapping up. They know. Look at them.
I see tails wagging.
Yeah. Are you going to take us out for a walk now? Yes. I am Ness Jones from nessjones.com, or Separation Anxiety and Dogs Decoded on Facebook. That's really all I've got to say. Subscribe, like, give us a 5-star review.
Yes,
if you're listening on a podcast.
exactly.
Share us with
Hope
your
to see you
friends.
guys. Hope to see you guys next time. Bye.
Are you not going to say who you are? No.
I kind of said it at the beginning.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Bye. Oh, look.